Welcome everybody. We're just going to wait for a couple of minutes for folks to arrive. In the meantime, feel free to say hi, let us know where you're joining from and why you joined today's call in the chat.
Take a little time to study the leaves. The sea is calling, would you go sit by the shore, skipping stones? There's a whole lot of space for you.
Hello everyone. We're just waiting for a couple more people to arrive. In the meantime, feel free to say hi, let us know where you're joining from and why you joined today's call in the chat.
And I feel kind of funny, my body is tired, but I wanna be running, trying to meet myself where I'm at. I know a little fresh air could help with that. And it's another day and the news is heavy, need to stay on track, but my brain won't let me. There's some tears I need to cry. You say let the outside be your guide and go try.
Hello everyone. We're going to get started shortly. In the meantime, feel free to say hi, let us know where you're joining from and why you joined today's call in the chat. Thanks.
Skipping stones, there's a whole lot of space for you to unwind. Chop a little wood and spend a little time. Hey. Break it down now, chop some wood, it'll do you good. Take a little stroll around the neighborhood. Listen to the birds singing songs.
Okay, great. Awesome to see everyone putting in where they're coming from. We're going to give it one more minute and then, yeah.
Rest your bones, there's a whole lot of space for you to unwind. Chop a little wood and spend a little time. Hey, chop a little wood, chop a little wood, chop.
And then I see someone was telling us about AI reporting and transcription. That's not us. That's a participant who has enabled AI notes on their end. But without further ado, we'll get started now. All right, so it's pertinent that we're going to start with a land acknowledgement, especially since Indigenous solidarity is connected to climate justice. I'm calling in today from the unceded ancestral territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat, as well as other Indigenous nations who have cared for Takaranto. These are stolen lands on which, like in the rest of so-called Canada, colonization isn't a historic event, it is an ongoing force. In our fight for climate justice, we must recognize that our fight is intrinsically tied to Indigenous sovereignty. I encourage all of you to share the lands that you're calling in from, and if you're not sure, visit native-land.ca to find out. Right now, as wildfires burn in so-called Northern Ontario, First Nations are being impacted the most and the quickest. Despite making up less than 5% of Canada's population, Indigenous communities account for 1/3 of all wildfire evacuations. This is why it is critical that in tackling the climate crisis, we must not only tackle injustice against Indigenous peoples, but also lift up Indigenous leadership and sovereignty everywhere. True climate solutions are ones that prioritize returning land, control of resources, and governance rights to Indigenous peoples. In short, there's no climate justice without land back. If you have the means, please donate to the First Nations affected by the wildfires. We've compiled some donation links at the URL in the chat. Now we'll look at today's agenda. And then here's, yes, there we go. And then there's also a QR code there too. So for today's call, we will have first an introduction of the hosts for today. Then we will give you a lay of the land in terms of climate politics in this moment. Thirdly, we will take action together to push back on this. And lastly, we will close out for the night. And now we'll move on to the team intro. So these are our hosts for tonight. And without further ado, I will pass it to Chris to cover the context.
Thanks, Christina. Good to see so many people on the call tonight. Like you saw on the team slide, my name is Chris. I use he, him pronouns. I'm part of the 350 Canada team focusing on communications and digital engagement. It is really heartening to see so many people here. I know you're all concerned about the wildfires and extreme heat that we've been seeing recently. So I'm glad to be here with you tonight to take action together. So before we get into the main part of the call of taking action together, I'm going to talk a bit about the political moment that we're in. So I'll be talking about the lay of the land, this climate moment in Canada. There are three big factors at play in Canadian climate politics right now. Number one is climate disasters. Number two, pipeline politics. And thirdly, a fossil fuel industry that is still avoiding accountability for their primary responsibility in causing the climate crisis. And not only are they avoiding accountability, they're reaping massive profits at our expense. So, firstly, as you all know, Canada is burning. We've been living through a summer full of storms, flooding, extreme heat, and now the wildfire crisis that escalated dramatically last week. These climate impacts get more dangerous and costly each year, but somehow our leaders expect us to forget that this is happening. Canadian politicians of all stripes have been trying to downplay the climate crisis, telling us that that action on climate can wait until some imaginary future when the economy is on track. But last week's events reminded Canadians that nature doesn't care about political rhetoric. The climate science is simple. The longer we wait to get off fossil fuels, the worse these climate impacts will get. Second factor that's at play in the political landscape right now is pipeline politics, the resurgence of big oil's push for more fossil fuel infrastructure and a continued kicking down the can, continued moving of the goalposts for the necessary transition to renewable energy. Another word for this is climate denial, because advocating for the expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure and by extension, locking us into more fossil fuel production in the year 2026 is completely at odds with what we know we have to do to avoid the worst impacts of global heating. We have to leave oil, gas, and coal in the ground. But wealthy fossil fuel corporations and their billionaire shareholders, they know an opportunity when they see one. And they're taking full advantage of Donald Trump's threats and this elbows up moment that we're in to take pipeline proposals that we thought we had defeated as a movement and wrap them in the Canadian flag. I'm sure you've all seen the TV ads that the media coverage that tries to make us believe these mega projects are somehow in the national interest. And you've all been paying attention. You're here on this call because you're as outraged as I am. But to recap, in the span of just 1 week earlier this month, Prime Minister Carney publicly admitted that because of his climate policy rollbacks, Canada's emissions will be higher in the next few years than they were projected to be under the previous government's plan. And then, with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith at his side, Carney unveiled the proposed route for a new West Coast pipeline, 1 million barrels a day of tar sands oil to the West Coast. And a few days after that, Smith and Ontario Premier Doug Ford unveiled a proposal for another pipeline, this one heading east. And that same week, Ottawa announced a deal with BC that will accelerate fracked gas projects. If that seems overwhelming to you, just hearing that list again now, and thinking about the fact that all came within a matter of days, you should know that they're intentionally moving quickly to keep our movement off balance and to try to overwhelm any opposition. Big oil is taking advantage of our economic anxiety, and Carney is going along with it. He's spending his political capital that he's built to advance these dangerous projects that belong in the last century, not this one. Like I said at the start, it's inspiring to see so many people on the call tonight because that shows that resistance is growing. The honeymoon phase with the Carney government is ending. You're all here because you're as outraged as I am by these developments and you want to do something about it. That takes us to the final element of this moment in Canadian climate politics. They profit, we pay. While big oil is mounting this new pipeline push, they're continuing to rake in massive, obscene profits. A big part of that this year is due to the global oil price shock caused by the illegal war on Iran, which has escalated again in recent weeks. This year alone, Canadian oil and gas companies could make extra profits to the tune of 50 to 100 billion. That's 50 to 100 billion in profits that were not anticipated for this year simply because of the global oil price shock. This is happening while everyday Canadians, the people on this call, struggle to make ends meet. And it's not because big oil is innovating or investing. It's not because they're creating a massive influx of new jobs. They're just passively profiting from war. And every time gas prices go up, they squeeze more money from everyday Canadians, transferring it to the richest of the rich. Working people get poorer, while executives and investors make astronomical profits. That makes it all the more outrageous that Carney's proposed West Coast pipeline, which he originally promised would not move forward without a private sector backer, is now likely to be 90% taxpayer funded, costing us 35 to 44 billion if it goes ahead. And that's just their initial estimate. We know that pipeline projects in Canada have a tendency to go massively over budget. The federal government is also subsidizing Canada's oil and gas industry through massive tax breaks for carbon capture and storage schemes like the Pathways Project, which will amount to a drop in the bucket of the industry's carbon emissions if it even pans out. But it does give them a way to greenwash the pipelines that we talked about earlier. So that's why 350 Canada, our organization, along with a coalition of over 120 civil society, labor, and other organizations, is calling for a 75% tax on the excess profits of the fossil fuel industry. It's something that other nations like Canada have already started to move forward with, and so that's a part of our campaigning focus this year. We know that we should be making the polluters responsible for the climate crisis pay, not giving them handouts. So those are the three pieces, and this slide shows a summary of the landscape that we just talked about. It's a daunting situation, but while big oil has money, we have power on our side. We have people power on our side, and we have a plan to harness that people power. So with that, I'll pass it to Johanna, who's going to walk us through how we can take action together right now and through the rest of the summer.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much, Chris. My name's Johanna. I am based in Toronto, and I'm the national organizer on the 350 Canada team. So happy to be here with so many of you tonight, and happy to be leading us through some action taking. Because I imagine that many folks tuned into our call tonight because you, like me, are sad and angry and ready to take some action. So that's what we're going to do. Our first action tonight is going after the public. And why are we going after the public? Because our enemies are going so hard after the public, and the oil and gas lobbyists and their kind of propaganda machine, very well-funded propaganda machine, are working so hard right now to try to convince our communities that fossil fuels are not the problem, and in fact are like a necessary piece of the solution to the struggles that we're facing. That we somehow need oil and gas for our economy, even though we know that oil and gas are actually fueling expensive, dangerous, and life-threatening climate impacts. This ad here that you can see on the slide claims that LNG, Canadian LNG, will somehow reduce emissions. You know, this is truly wild propaganda, but unfortunately it's working. And our politicians are taking advantage of this. They're doing their own propaganda. I saw some chatter in the chat about some of the ads that people are seeing, the TV spots that people are seeing. It's everywhere right now. They're working really hard to try to convince Canadians to support pipelines. And unfortunately, we're seeing some traction from those lies, where we're seeing disturbing polling results showing some people supporting new pipeline projects. Right now, we have a real opportunity because people across the whole country are actually thinking about climate crisis as we face impacts on our doorsteps. But the media isn't really connecting the dots between the smoke and the heat and the fires that we've all been experiencing, many of us have been experiencing for the last week, and the oil and gas industry that's actually responsible for worsening those crises. Last week, we reached more than 1 million people with our Instagram content, trying to tell the story and connect these dots. But because of the siloing of social media, there are still big swaths of the public that we aren't reaching yet. And it's so important for us on this call tonight to help do this work and help connect the dots for our communities and our neighbors to ensure that they understand the connection between these two stories. Which brings us to our first action for this evening. We will be flooding media outlets coast to coast with letters to the editor to help reach beyond the choir and reach tens of thousands of new eyes with this timely intervention. Now, quick, while climate chaos is still top of mind for so many of us. Now, one powerful way to help reach people in these moments and to help make these connections is by starting off with our own personal stories. So last week, some folks on the call might have seen this, but I shared a personal story on our 350 Canada social media about how I've been impacted by the extreme heat and the smoke last week as a parent and a tenant in Toronto. And you can see some excerpts from that story here on the slide. And I talked about some seemingly small things like my kids not being able to play baseball outside. I had to keep them in all week. And some really big, scary things like trying to keep my family safe without air conditioning, and the anxiety about what wildfires and smokes meant for my own community and also for those on the front lines. And I tried to draw those connections from the climate crisis that I was experiencing to the oil and gas industry and the politicians that support and subsidize them. But I know that I'm not alone here. And I know that everybody on this call, there's almost 300 of us here tonight. I know all of us have been impacted by the climate crisis in some way. Some of you probably breathed in toxic smoke last week. Many of you may have had to keep your kids inside. Maybe you had loved ones who faced evacuation, or you've had a park or a place you care about been hit by fires recently. Maybe you lost power or experienced extreme storms or flooding as a result of the fossil fuels climate chaos. Even if you somehow haven't been hit recently by direct impacts in your community, you may be dealing with anxiety about what the future holds. So what I'd like to do is now just take a moment and encourage everybody to just think about the ways that you have been experienced climate chaos in the last week or two, or in the last few months, or in the last few years, that's shaping how you're thinking about the future. And I want everybody to, if possible, put that in the chat. We're just going to take a minute and all share our own stories of climate impacts, so we can start to see how the climate crisis is playing out across the country. So some fellow Torontonians experiencing those yellow skies. People couldn't see anything because of the smoke. Climate grief, anxiety, people worried about their grandkids. I hear that. Someone's citing the heat dome in BC that happened almost exactly 5 years ago and took hundreds of lives. See a couple people talking about health impacts, the impacts on people's lungs of just inhaling all that wildfire smoke. It is scary. People can't go outside, anxiety, yeah. Oh, there's so many, I can't keep up with the comments in the chat here, but I'd encourage people to keep sharing and keep reading the stories that people are sharing right now. Okay, so this is really powerful. It's scary, like the story that Chris told earlier about the politics, the political landscape, the climate chaos that's happening in Canada. It's a scary time. And I know that people are being impacted in different ways in 2 different degrees across the country. And there are people who are further from the front lines, and there are people who are experiencing fires right on their doorstep. All of it is scary. And it's really what's motivating so many of us to be taking action tonight. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to use these stories that everybody is sharing in the chat right now as the basis for a letter to the editor. Again, the point of this is to reach the public and help them understand that the crises that we're facing aren't happening in a vacuum. You know, they are the result of the climate chaos caused by the fossil fuel sector, and that our government needs to take action to curb that chaos now before it's too late. So I'm going to put a link in the chat for a tool that's also on the slide here. If you go to to.350.org/LTE, you'll be able to access our letter to the editor tool. And we're actually going to take a few minutes to do this action right now together on the call. So keep it coming in the chat, but we're going to be doing a little bit of writing in our actual letters as well. So if you can open up this link, you'll be able to first just fill out your personal information, and based on your location, this tool is going to populate a couple of local media outlets that we're going to be able to find and submit our letters to the editor to. Can you go to the next slide, Etienne? Okay. Maybe I'll just share that link in the chat again so folks, I know the chat is moving quickly, but I want to make sure that folks are able to open up this link. Thanks, Chris. And thank you to everybody who's sharing stories here. It's really heartbreaking. I want these stories to reach as wide an audience as possible, so we're going to try to get some of them published. So our game plan for that is for everybody to go to this letter to the editor tool, open it up, put in your information, and then you'll see what pops up will be a list of different local media outlets. So this list here on the slide is what pops up if I put my address in. And what we would encourage you to do, and again, I'm going to slow down so everyone has a chance to actually fill this out, is to select one outlet at a time. If you submit a template letter to a bunch of outlets, the likelihood of it getting published is very low. But if you're able to respond to a particular article from a particular target newspaper, it's much more likely that it'll actually get published, and then that you'll be able to reach the readers, the audience of that newspaper. So what I'd encourage everybody to do is pick one newspaper. What I did this morning when I filled this out was I picked the Toronto Star. Then I went to the Toronto Star website and I looked up, tried to find an article that was relevant that I could hitch my contribution to. So I looked for an article about, in my case, I looked for an article about the air quality concerns in Toronto, but it could be anything about the climate crisis, other climate impacts, fossil fuel projects. There's actually so much media attention to climate right now. It's just not connecting those dots for us. So that's why we have to do that work for them. Once you've picked your article and you've picked your outlet, you can then actually write your letter. We've got some template talking points auto-populated in the tool there, but what I would encourage everybody to do is to start with the kind of personal story that many of you are sharing in the chat, either the ways that the climate crisis is impacting you or your loved ones, the concerns, the anxieties, the fears you have, the way that you're witnessing this play out in your community or in your part of the country. Start with that story and then use some of the talking points that we've got in our tool to help connect the dots back to the fossil fuel sector that's responsible for that crisis. I'd ask you to keep it to about 150 words or so, or 1,200 characters, which is what it's actually going to measure in the bottom of that tool for folks who are looking at it. And that just makes it more likely to get published because you have to keep it pretty short. And I would ask folks to keep the phrase, "No pipelines on a burning planet," in your letter to the editor, because that's what's going to allow us to track all the letters that get published across the country and amplify them and tell a really powerful story of people across the country who are helping draw out these links. So, Etienne, maybe you can put some music on. We're going to take a few minutes right now to all just fill out this tool on our own computers. I sent one in to the Toronto Star this morning, but I'm going to do another one. If you want to keep at it, you can do this several times, but I would encourage folks to try to customize it as much as possible. Thank you. Let us know if you have questions in the chat.
Oh, I'm seeing a question, Johanna, about should we have different subject lines? Yeah, I think we should all be creative and put our own spin on the subject line.
Totally. Yeah, it makes it more likely to get through.
How's everyone doing for time? Should I keep the music going for a bit?
Seems like people are still working on it. I see a question about what to do if the local paper doesn't cover climate change at all. I mean, you can get creative. It doesn't have to be anchored to an existing article. It's just more likely to get through. But even if it's covering extreme weather or, yeah, it doesn't have to have a climate change angle. That's the angle that you're bringing to the table. Oh, somebody's done. All right.
Yeah, I see a few other people looking for more time. I'll address a few of the things I've seen in the chat. I know you've been answering them, Johanna, but some people might want to hear the answers too. The phrase "no pipelines on a burning planet," that's the anchor phrase of our campaign, but it's also a useful way for us to track published letters. So that doesn't have to be the subject of your email. In fact, it should be, but it should be somewhere in your letter. So that that's a message.
Okay. I'm seeing actually a number of submissions have come through on our back end. So folks should feel comfortable to keep working on it, but maybe we can move on and keep talking about some other ways that folks can take action. Atia, if you want to wind the music down. Awesome. We will send these tools out after this call. So if you've lost the link, don't worry about it. I know some people are still in the process of writing it. It took me a minute too this morning when I tried. But I am also seeing a lot of letters streaming in, which is so great. So we're really excited to get these out there. We've done actions like this before and often get quite a lot published. Feel free to send us an email if your letter is selected and published. We'd love to spread the word and amplify that and see how many people we're able to reach. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Johanna. That was really great. I was just submitting my letter as well. So thanks so much for walking us through that and for all those great tips. So I want to transition us to the next part of this presentation. We have talked a lot about connecting the dots for the public, which is absolutely essential because we know when people move, politicians follow. However, what's really important to recognize is that we also can't let our federal leaders get away with burning our climate, with making decisions that are detrimental to our future. And so the next part of our call today is about how we can take action and how we can ensure there is no peace for climate burning MPs. So at this point, we have tried to steer them in the right direction. We've tried to use all the avenues available to us to push federal leaders. We've sent emails. I mean, throw an emoji in the chat if you sent an email to your MP. If you've made a phone call, let us know in the chat because we've also flooded their phone lines. We've visited them at their offices. In fact, many of you were there when on June 25th, we sent our message loud and clear with actions at 40 plus MP offices across the country. Together, we delivered giant people's MOUs and called on MPs to make a deal with the people and oppose fossil fuel extraction, tax the billions of oil and gas companies, and deliver definitive action to protect our communities, our future, and the planet. But how did they respond? If you were there at a local action, let us know in the chat and let us know how your MP responded to your action as well. I know the chat is moving quickly, but just a spoiler alert, when we showed up, a lot of us felt completely ignored. Some of us felt particularly stung because our MPs locked their doors and refused to open them. I know that's what happened at my local action when I went. And those that did meet with their constituents refused to make firm commitments about next steps. And even some that were pressed by media refused to comment. And then, of course, we know, as Chris reminded us earlier, that within a week of us taking action, we saw Carney posting a video where he was backtracking climate action and saying that climate action was not sustainable for the long term, as though breathing in these toxic fumes and living in unbearable heat is somehow sustainable for the long-term future. And then he went ahead and co-sponsored the West Coast Pipeline with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, which we know would be absolutely detrimental for our climate. So the bottom line is MPs are shutting us out, and at the same time, they're doubling down on a reckless agenda of fossil fuel expansion. The government is now planning to spend tens of billions of our taxpayer dollars on a toxic West Coast West Coast pipeline that will endanger ecosystems, enrich the billionaire class, and worsen the climate emergency for the rest of us. So if they're not listening to us, I guess the question is, who are they listening to? And if you just if you check out this oil and gas lobbying tracker by Environmental Defense, you can see that just in the first half of this year, in fact, before we even hit June, they had already met with fossil fuel companies 685 times. Now, if you do the math, that is about 6.5 times every single weekday. How do they even have enough time to do that? Well, I guess they're certainly not listening to their constituents or people across the country, which probably opens up some time for them. But this is absolutely outrageous. And so if they're going to ignore us, we're not going to back away. We have to make sure that we make our voices impossible to ignore. So that's our plan. This summer, we want to confront MPs and federal politicians, key leaders in Prime Minister Carney's government with the question, Canada's burning. When will your government stop fueling the crisis? And there are variations of this question and follow-up questions that are listed here that I won't read out, but essentially, they all get across the same message, which is that we should not be expanding fossil fuels in the climate emergency, and there can be no pipelines on a burning planet, as we just wrote in our letters to the editor as well. So how can we do that? Well, the first thing that we can do is go online, which is easy enough, right? We know that MPs and federal politicians are using social media to perform concern about the climate emergency while they continue business as usual, while they have spent the last year backing Carney's anti-climate, pro-fossil fuel agenda. So let's disrupt this public story and point out that hypocrisy, so that so we can confront them with the truth and kind of expose their hypocrisy for the public as well. So the goal with going online is that we are disrupting their public stories. So a great way to do that is go on their social media pages where they're making posts and comment with the truth, comment with a highlight of the hypocrisy that we're seeing. So we're already seeing people do that. So one example is this video that Carney put up of, just about concern around the wildfires. Immediately, there were so many responses. Why are you building a pipeline in a climate emergency? This doesn't mean anything if you're continuing to expand pipelines and data centers. So really strong comments, and they were resonating a lot with other people there. But even on local pages. So recently, Mark Gerritsen, the MP for Kingston, announced a transit announcement locally, and it was under smoky skies. So constituents like Chris, who's on this call, took to Instagram and commented on that, just pointed out, this is happening under smoky skies that you are enabling. So this is how we can really expose their story online. We can also storm the comments of, their public posts or other public posts from other accounts where they are named, or if there are stories about climate impacts coming from different community groups, we can also tag the MP in those comments. So there's various ways to take action online, and it's great to tag the handle of your MP on posts about climate impacts by local residents and community members and community groups as well. So lots of ways to do that. And if you've already done this, do share. Yeah, okay. We're also going to confront them in person. So this is the next stage, with members of parliament back in their ridings for the summer and actively trying to build goodwill in their communities. We're going to confront them face to face with our message. We will make it impossible for them to ignore the climate chaos that their government is worsening with their reckless policy choices and their reckless expansion of the fossil fuel industry. So, we can find them wherever they are. They're going to be at street festivals, summer barbecues, town halls. Essentially, MPs like to spend their summer building good faith in their communities. So we're going to find out where they are, and we will show up with our question, and we will come prepared. So there's various ways to do this. First, we can do a verbal intervention. Oh, actually, before I progress, I'm going to go back to the slide and just point out this action. Actually, it was targeting my local MP Talib Nur Mohammed and his hypocrisy around implementing an arms embargo on Israel. And these very concerned constituents showed up at his summer barbecue last summer and really grilled him about this choice. And he was left without anything to say. So it was very embarrassing for him and really, really satisfying for constituents who were able to expose his position very clearly in a video. All right, so I want to play a video also from the arms embargo campaign, a really powerful confrontation of Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand. So I will play that because obviously it's best to watch a video and see it in action, better than explaining it.
Hey, Minister, I'm just curious what's going to take
Can
you
you
to
hear
stop arming genocide now that we've reached 1,000 days of Israel's crimes? Oh, I'm just not sure that we're busy right now is going to hold up in court. How do you intend to plead when you reach the International Criminal Courts, Minister, for your active complicity? And do you intend to charge the Canadian taxpayers for your active complicity in war crimes? And for... Minister, are you choosing to walk away from a constituent? Minister, it's been 1,000 days of Israel's genocide. How do you plead? Minister, I think it's a reasonable question to ask. What it's going to take you to stop arming Israel.
Oof. How did it feel to watch that? Can you share in the comments the feelings and emotions that came up for you as you watched that? Yeah, it's I'm filled with these mixed emotions of gratitude for the powerful intervention by these constituents, these community members, everyday people just like us, and also just anger, rage, frustration at her silence. Like it's actually I'm shaking a bit, hearing her it just basically take no responsibility as thousands of people are dying. It's just it's absolutely infuriating. So this video accomplishes so much, and this is what we can accomplish with a strong verbal confrontation, is that we can force the politician to either answer our question and actually expose their position for what it is, which is terrible. So make their stance very explicit, or they'll dodge the question, and that will make them look very silly, untrustworthy, incompetent, very unaccountable. That's that is like the tip of the iceberg of how I feel watching that video. But definitely, she seemed quite unaccountable to her decisions. And a verbal confrontation is easiest when you're in a situation where you know that the MP or the target will be reachable. So it could be a community barbecue, for instance, like on the previous slide. It could be a picnic, a town hall, or if you happen to have them in front of you at the restaurant you're eating at, that's great as well. It can be a bit of a daunting exercise, but if you're planning to do this, it's really important to prepare and practice. So practice, the question you're going to ask, and really own your power, because as you can see in that video, the Foreign Affairs Minister was not the one who seemed powerful. The constituents were the one who held the power in that interaction. So it's really helpful to feel prepared, to feel grounded, to practice with your friends, to be persistent. So to have, either repeat the question, which is totally okay, or practice some follow-ups as well. And then of course, grab a video. So going with at least one friend who can record the interaction is really important, because that video will really expose the position to the public, and it will really call out the contradictions in their own narrative. So we have a toolkit that will have all of this information, and it will have links to videos that you can watch as well. There's a second video here as well, but we don't have time for that. We don't have time for that right now, but we will go into another form of in-person confrontation, which is a visual confrontation. So I just wanted to, before I move on, just how does that feel? How is any questions or any thoughts about verbal interventions before we move on? Yes, not a lot of faith in members of parliament, which is so fair. Yeah, and I think we will also cover, the longer term arc that this is a part of as well. Um, Yeah, there's a good question about, is there an official day to protest against MPs, or is it kind of more broad organizing, writing by writing? This is really taking advantage of opportunities where we know MPs are in communities, so it will happen at different times. It won't be a dedicated day. On June 25th, the People's MOU Day of Action that I talked about earlier, that was a dedicated day where we all took action. And a lot of MPs, knew that we were coming and they closed their doors. They weren't available to us. So if they're going to do that, if they're going to shut us out, then we're going to find them where they are in their communities and confront them as well. So another way to confront MPs and political leaders in person is to do a visual intervention. So this works when perhaps you can't directly engage with the politician, or if you want to expose something to the public more broadly without having a direct interaction. So this allows you to confront a politician and expose their hypocrisy for the public to see. So with this, you really need strong visuals like banners and signs, and you can position them to really effectively disrupt a photo op and also disrupt their narrative as well. So with this, you want to prep your visuals and really think about the final photograph that you want. So you can see this really great photo by folks that were protesting the Trans Mountain Pipeline at Trudeau Town Hall, and this guy over here getting visually intervened, even though he was in close range. It was really important to kind of expose him as a villain as well. This was a really cool action. If you've done this before, also let us know in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. So just to kind of go over this again, we do have this toolkit that has really that has a breakdown of all of the things that we've discussed. I do want to share some tips and tricks, including, where do you find out where your MP is? You can find out on their social media page. You can sign up for their online newsletter. Usually that's available on their website, and they might even send post to your IRL inbox in real life, with their calendars of events. So those are things to monitor. And you can recruit neighbors to be on the lookout too. And you can also recruit neighbors and friends to be your crew that does this action with you. It's important to have a clear plan. So if the event requires an RSVP or registration, important to make sure that you're registered for the event. Maybe scope out the venue ahead of time. If it's a hotel lobby or a restaurant, that might be a more confined location than, say, a barbecue. Or at least just check it out online to see, if you can see some pictures and get a sense of what it looks like. And be respectful. This is really important in order to hold the moral high ground. We must, be respectful and not inflammatory. That doesn't mean we're not firm. We can be extremely firm, extremely clear, while also making sure that we're not escalatory. And while we're holding the moral high ground, it makes it really clear in the video content, in the content that we're sharing, who is in the right and who is in the wrong. And of course, really important to get a photo or video and to post it. And the toolkit also has hashtags and things that we're doing to basically keep track of all of this content that we're using to expose the positions of federal leaders. And if you are interested in joining us, it can be very encouraging to do it in a team. So I really want to encourage you all to join us. We have 2 WhatsApp groups. So one is to receive notifications about in-person confrontation opportunities, and receive support to confront key targets. So you can join that if you're interested in targeting politicians in your local area. You can also find neighbors there who might join you. And then we also have a remote support team that will kind of enable a lot of this in-person action by doing some research, collecting intel, by collectively doing some of the more online interventions, and also using WhatsApp and SMS tools to get people out to local actions. So you have both options available to you depending on your comfort level, also depending on the riding you're in. You might choose one or the other. And I just want to point out that this is one part of a broader arc. So right now, there is a lot of recalculation happening in the climate movement, and we're in conversation with many other groups about how we are confronting this agenda in the fall. We know that we have to be out there making our positions extremely clear and fighting back against this, because this is an absolutely horrific direction for our government to go in, for our tax dollars to be invested in fossil fuels that are fueling the climate emergency. So we are going to, we're going to take time this summer to really expose the positions of this government, because that is also a really important part about winning the public. We need as much of the public on our side, and we know that our enemies are using Trump's volatility and other geopolitical instability to essentially build up support for the fossil fuel industry. But our goal this summer is to really expose the fossil fuel industry as the perpetrators of the climate crisis, and to expose the politicians that are enabling them as the people that are essentially fueling this crisis as well. So this is going to be one part of a broader arc, and we will have more to share about our broader journey about how we fight back. But this is a really important step in the right direction, because this will send a really clear message before MPs return to Parliament in the fall. So with that, I'll pass it on to Christina to wrap up our call, because we are reaching the end.
Yep. All right. So thank you everyone so much for coming tonight. So a last quick thing before we say good night is that the consultation window closes tomorrow for the government's proposal to gut environmental protections and fast track destructive mega projects. And so what does this mean? If passed, this would create special federal economic zones where all new development is pre-approved. And also companies proposing new pipelines would no longer need to pass an environmental impact assessment prior to their project receiving approval. And it would suspend the Fisheries Act and Species at Risk Act that are crucial laws that were created to protect vulnerable habitats. And it would allow companies to start construction while projects are still in review. Meanwhile, they will rush through consultations with Indigenous peoples and communities. So please make sure to fill it out before the deadline tomorrow. The link was put into the chat. And yeah, so thank you so much for coming to the call. We know you were probably drawn by the multiple posts or the eco-anxiety and eco-grief. And we know that when people unite, we can win. And we need you more than ever right now. And so the final call to actions for tonight are: 1, send your letter to the editor, and you can send it to multiple news outlets responding to different stories on the new wildfires and pipelines. Make sure to read the no piece for MP's toolkit. And there's a last chance to take the Stop Fast Tracking Destruction action. Additionally, if you have the means, please donate to wildfire evacuees. Thank you again. We have previously fought and won, and this is the time to continue. Every action you take is important.
Amazing. Thank you. I think we have one link to share that has all of these things in one place. So maybe we can share that link as well. I'm just going to pull it up. Thank you so much, everyone. It's giving me so much hope to be with all of you today. All of the links that we shared are available at this website. So I just shared the link for that as well. And we will email everything out as well. Thank you so much.